Hey there, welcome back. I'm delighted to welcome you to Victor Dimitrov. Sorry, I can't even. I was practicing
butchered
that.
It. Just butchered
the first thing I was going to introduce as Dimitrov.
Yeah.
I was going to introduce you as weight of thought, but there we go.
Way easier.
So, I've been admiring your designs online, and so you can too. He's going to tell you all about where to find out more about him. And so on. But the one key thing I think that people need to know is your absolute love of Attack on Titan.
All right, that's facts. That's a great way to start this thing, actually.
You can. All right, so over to you, Victor.
Okay. Hey, guys. So my name is Victor Dimitrov, and when I do artwork, I do it under the guise of Weight of Thought. And I'm a 3D design consultant for a company called 8VC. So let me pull up my demo reel and get you guys introduced to me fairly quickly, and then I'll start going through a little bit more of an intro and go through my work. Okay, so that was my demo reel, and today, oh wow, we got some cheers in that. Today what we're going to talk about is basically the importance of doing personal projects to kind of grow your aesthetic, and a little later on in the lesson I'm going to be talking about vertex maps and how I use them in environment design and how to do creative loops using the effectors within Cinema 4D. So just to briefly catch you guys up on how I've kind of grown my artistic skill set. It's always been through these independent projects, and let me bring up one right now. So when I really wanted to learn the program, a big part of it for me was that I have to jump into the pool, into the deep end really quickly, and that's usually how I learn how to swim. And so I really wanted to do a sci-fi project because at the time when I was doing these projects, I felt like I wasn't being pushed within my career. So I decided I'm going to start doubling down on my own skill sets and try to create something that showcases the things that I'm capable of doing. And it started from just creating this spaceship, which I named after my friend's cat that passed away, to then building out the astronaut. And after the astronaut, I started to build out the spaceship. From then on, I started to do the concept design for the asteroid. And moving forward, I kept doing piece after piece, so I was getting more of the design aesthetic before I felt comfortable basically jumping into creating the full-blown piece, which ended up being the Weightless project. And I can play just a small snippet of that as well. So after creating that project, what that was able to do was I was able to have something that proved skill set and worth. And I think a big important thing for 3D artists coming into the field to understand is that it's not really what you think you can do, it's what you can prove. And so designing these kinds of projects really help catapult something that speaks to your creative aesthetic, and you're able to put that within your demo reel. And from there, I started getting more and more projects that were in line with the work that I wanted to do. Started working for a company called Double Negative, and from there was headhunted to be a design consultant for a company called 8VC. Now, from then on, I was doing more brand films that were in line with the aesthetic that I had basically pursued. So I can play you one of those brand films as well, and then we're going to get jumping into the lesson soon after that. Oh, and just a heads up, I was able to double team this with my buddy Harrison Vincent. He goes under H-Tapes. And shout out to Chris, the two Lukes, and all the guys over at 8VC.
When we work together towards an optimistic vision of the future, anything is possible. There's no limit to what humanity can build, or the prosperity that free people can achieve. Cities, community, logistics, infrastructure, environment, on Earth or abroad. When even one person is not given the opportunity to reach her full potential, our job is not yet done. Help us build a better future at AmericanOptimist.com.
Okay, and so this project was basically a two-man team, me and my buddy H-Tapes, and it started off the same process as all the others. We started to build out concept art, and here's some of it right here with different variations of what the space station was going to look like, the buildings and all that jazz. This was a different variation of what the space station was going to be interpreted as, which was a bulkier kind of build. And all this is just concept art that I was able to do using Cinema 4D and Octane. And I'll be going through a few of the environmental techniques that I utilized within some of these during this current lesson. And over here, too, is a really cool piece that I just don't think it was able to make it in, but man, it would have been rad to put this within the brand film, but it just didn't seem to really fit within the core context of it. But you can do some really quick experimentation with concept design within C4D, utilizing Octane, Redshift, wherever you guys feel like is more suitable for you. But I started off with Octane, so that's where I started to really gain like the knowledge a lot quicker. And so what ended up happening was I started to get more projects and create more stuff that was in line with my aesthetic. And then the COVID situation hit, and in Montreal we went into a bit of a lockdown. And during that stage, I felt more compelled to work on a few other personal projects of mine. And the difference was that I didn't really want to drop 6 months to a year to kind of create something bigger. I wanted to do smaller projects that showcased a certain skill set. I wanted to do smaller loops and explore more aesthetics. And so it started off really simply with just a simple loop. Just environment design that I just kind of wanted to play around with, how to put the rocks in place, how to loop the deer going through, just simple movement with the birds, and the shoreline having some foam over at the sides. And from there I started to feel like, okay, cool, well this was just a small piece that I got to do, but I got to explore so many different techniques. And from there, I started to jump into different things I wanted to explore. And for this one, it was basically I wanted to mess around with the graffiti, texturing within Octane Render, and how to basically accomplish that look. And animation techniques for the 3D model I've got here, which I'll be showcasing later in the presentation, how to rig it up with bones and do some subtle animation. So if you're looking at it, she's the movement with the bear, the water moving forward, the birds going through. And each single one of these, I felt really challenged, like a certain aesthetic that I was going for, because I grew up with 90s hip-hop, 80s hip-hop, and 80s anime, and 90s anime, and I feel like a lot of my stuff is basically an homage to that. And with every single piece, I really felt like I wanted to push different design aspects. For this one, it was about I just wanted to do more sci-fi, which is something that I had, at that point, fallen a little bit more off of doing. So I just wanted to do like a simple sunset and have that loop with the characters and putting in some design techniques. And within my pieces, there's just always birds, and there's something about designing a CGI car or designing a flying blimp in the future. You have this. The gift of doing sci-fi is that a lot of it is just imagination and what you think is cool. So you can just really just chase an aesthetic. And from then on, I did this. I got the lockdowns ended in Montreal, but then maybe about 2 months later, around New Year's, we went right back into it. We had a 10 p.m. curfew, and that's when I created this little piece over here. And this is going to be more or less what I'm going to be talking to you guys about. So I'll be talking about the iteration process, how it was done, a few of the looping techniques with the grass, how I was able to get the grass moving, how I was able to get the dress moving, the hand over here, the birds, the chipmunk, and all that jazz. And I also modeled this character within C4D. Everything's textured within C4D using Octane render, and it's all procedurally done. So this project was actually something that, like, I realized I was using personal projects for a very long time to basically get the next project, showcase what I could do, and attract more of the work that I wanted to be working on. But then as the lockdown happened, I realized, like, I actually really like doing this stuff. It's not just a career. It's just something that I truly enjoy doing. And while working on this, it was just such a gift to have a craft that you can just lose your time into, lose your and just chase an aesthetic. I just had a Spotify playlist going, and for the month of lockdown that we had, I was just working on this. And for the first time, everything felt super intuitive. The creation process, the ability to manipulate the program however I saw fit to create whatever I really wanted to. And to close this out, this little introduction of mine, I was able to go back into an older piece of mine, and within that piece, take those techniques that I'd learned throughout the process and update it. So if we look, and I'm going to poo-poo on some of my work here. If you looked at, like, the end piece of this little shot over here, there was always something that bothered me, and it was how I basically did the grass. It just wasn't as realistic as I could make it, and I was at such a time crunch at the time that, like, I had to just say, hey, you know what? It is what it is. I got to just render this out because I got to move on to the next gig, and I got to get the next project. But being able to jump back into an older project and take those techniques and having the time to basically rework it and do it the way that I think you wanted to envision it prior was just something special, because it happens so much quicker. The grass is a little bit more subtle. The movement of the trees is subtle. The music is subtle. The birds move differently. My ability to basically create, like, the background was just far more improved. I was able to get the aesthetic I wanted to get. I got the loops going properly. The character moves the way that I wanted to move. And it just felt like a beautiful full circle to go back into an older project and show yourself that you had grown as an artist. And if you look back, you can kind of see the iteration process through this. And a big part of this is basically research. And so if you have any time, I highly recommend that you get a program called PureRef. And it's a really good program that allows you to basically take as much concept art as you could find, put it in a single file, and use that as reference for your work, because a lot of what I do is just research. And I can just pull up, let me pull up what I had here for my particular, let me just go to the desktop, and over the desktop, Siggraph, Victor Dimitrov, and let me pull up my PureRef. So I just took a screenshot of it, and let me see if I can zoom into it over here. Oh yeah, that's working exactly like how I wanted to work. Anyways, all right, guys. I had a pure ref. It looked great. It had some images in it, but moving forward, what we're going to do right now is we're going to talk about the techniques I utilize within this image. Okay. So let me pull up the Behance one more time, and I'm going to go through it with you guys, and I'm going to show you what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about environment design, how to put the grass on there using Forester. We're going to talk about, let me just play it so you guys can see it. We're going to talk about how it loops into itself so that it's seamless, that loop happens over and over again. We're going to talk about how the dress moves without using dynamics. We're going to use a selection tag and a restriction tag to basically create this using vertex maps. I'm going to show you how to use Signal just to do some quick animation because I used it for all the fingers. And over here is motion clips, but we're not going to be talking about that. But we will be talking about creating pathways as well. So over here was a pathway that I crafted using the weight vertex map so that the grass, I could just control where it grows. So without further ado, I'm going to open up my Cinema 4D, and we're going to talk about some of these techniques. Here, and just so I've got something that I can always pull up. Okay, so we've got this character, and as you can see right now, she's got bones rigged to her, and that's how I'm creating a lot of the animation. So we're going to start it from scratch. I've got her over here, but I want you guys to see what happens. Okay, so I've got this character tag. I've got this character, and this is a 3D model, and it's rendered. So there are no bones attached to this. This is just a 3D scan of an individual. Let me delete everything over here. Okay, cool. We're going to go into the coordinate system, and right now, I'm just going to hit right-click at the end of everything, and that's going to zero it out. Right-click, right-click, right-click. Okay, so we've got this 3D model, right? But we want to get some animation out of it because I think having a 3D model within your piece, especially when you're doing an animated loop, you want it to react to the thing that you've created. So I created the robot. I want something that basically points to it and guides your eye towards it compositionally. So I felt a cool way to kind of accomplish that goal was to have this 3D scan of this girl, but I wanted to manipulate the textures. I wanted some movement on her, and how am I going to do that? Well, it's actually really simple, and I got this technique, this quick and dirty technique off an artist called Travis Davids, who you guys should all check out. He does some amazing tutorials, and I think he actually got it from another artist called Ian Hubert, which is a phenomenal Blender artist. But really quickly, what you're doing is you're taking the joint tool, and what I'm going to do is just put it to the side. I'm going to get my display to show lines so that we can all see this. And using the control, holding control, what I'm doing right now is creating joints. And so I'm moving. Let me just do this one more time. What I'm doing is creating one to the knee, one to the torso, one to the arm, and one to the head, right? And so notice that if I move it over here, that none of this is aligned, right? So I'm going to take the selection tag over here, and what I'm going to do is select the joint that I want to move, and I want it to align it. And great way to basically do this aligning stuff so that it's a lot easier for you is hit the world transform over here. So now I can just move things pretty easily with the axis oriented towards the camera. And all I'm doing is some simple stuff over here. So just aligning this so that it is attached to this character. Okay, sweet. So we've got a basic spine for her. And what I want to do now is select everything over here. I'm going to delete the original model. I'm going to select from the top the animated girl all the way down to the joint 6. I'm going to go to the character tag. And what I'm going to do now is hit bind. And if you look over here, what it's doing is doing some calculations at the bottom left hand of the screen. And now this character is bound, right? What's beautiful about this is now I can go into these joints and I can create some really subtle movement out of this. Just using the rotation, I can move her knees moving back and forth. I can move her swaying back and forth, and her arm, her neck, and all that jazz can move. And the trick to this really is subtlety. Like you don't want to push it to the point where and I want to show you what happens if you push it actually. So if you look at this and you can see her polygons, you know, a subtle movement is really easy to pull off, but when you start stretching it too much, you start seeing the stretching of the polygons. So we want this thing to loop. You can drop some keyframes, but I'm going to show you more my technique of doing this, and that's basically using this plugin called Signal, done by the guys over at Grayscale Gorilla. So it's really quick and painless. You don't have to drop keyframes, which is why I really like it. You just grab the girl, you go into the coordinate system, and you decide what you want to, what parameter do you want to affect. And so I want to affect joint 3, actually joint 5, and I want to affect the rotation of it over here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the H, drag and drop it. I'm going to grab the rotation, sorry. Second, boom. Grab joint 5 over here. And the magic of this system. Well, regardless. Okay, so this plugin doesn't seem to be... Oh, I know why. Okay, 1 second. I'm going to put Signal over here. I'm going to grab this. Boom. Okay, so I made a quick error, and I want you guys to understand what I did there. What I was doing is putting the Signal tag onto the CG version of the girl, the realistic 3D scan, but I should have put it on the joint 5 tag, so which is the joint that I'm affecting, and using its rotation parameters. So I put the rotation tag on there. All I want to do is move it to 0, and quickly what's going on is I'm dragging it down, and I've got 72 frames to deal with, and so right now if I hit play, you'll notice nothing's happening, right? Because I actually haven't affected this guy. So we're going to go over here. We're going to move this guy over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit ping pong. And ping pong is going to move this back and forth. Sweet. And we're going to move this 32 frames. Okay, sweet. And okay, awesome. And so what's happening is that she's looping back and forth into herself, and we're doing it in, I've got 32 frames, but if we divide 72 by 2, we've got 36, and so now the loop should be perfect going back and forth. Okay, sweet. So we've got this loop of the finger going back and forth using the plugin Signal, and now what do we want to do? Well, let's pull up the project one more time, and we've got this. We've got her dress moving in the wind. And let me show you a really quick and easy way to do that without using dynamics, and instead using the restriction tag and a deformer. So let's pull up Cinema 4D over here. And what I'm going to do is showcase this in the easiest method I can. So I'm going to pull up this cube, and with this cube, I'm going to go into Object. I'm going to hit 20 and 20 on the segments. And I'm going to hit the display, so it displays these guys. And now I've got some geometry on this guy. I'm going to bake it. And with the bake, what I'm going to do next is hit the selection tag over here. And with, let me grab this rectangle selection. I'm going to grab this guy over here. I'm going to hit the polygonal selection instead of the object selection. And now I've got some polygons, right? And really quickly, I can grab the selection tool over here, and I'm hitting Control to delete, and I'm hitting just pressing straight to kind of get these things. But I want to move through this, so I'm going to hit the rectangle tool. I want to do visible only. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is grab these guys over here. Cool. So I've got this, and now what I want to happen is to create a vertex weight. So I'm going to get this vertex weight menu up here. I'm going to hit 100%, and I'm going to hit OK. So what's happened here is everything that is yellow will be affected, everything that is red won't be affected. And that's basically how I'm going about creating that waviness. So let me show you what happens when I don't use the vertex weight, and then I'm going to put on the restriction tag and show you what happens when I do. So I'm going to grab a deformer, and I'm going to hit the wind deformer. And I'm going to put this under the cube, and if you notice, it affects the entire cube, which is not what we want, right? We want to affect, just like this dress over here, what we want to do is affect a specific spot, right? And so how are we going to do that? Well, we've got this weight map that we've painted, and what we could do is right-click on the deformer, go into Rigging Tools, hit the restriction tag, and now we grab our weight and drop it into the restriction tag, and now we're only affecting the bottom. And so let me put this underneath a subdivision thing just so it's a little bit smoother. But now we're only affecting the bottom of the dress, basically. And so what I'm going to do here, guys, is I'm not going to show it to you on the model because that's not really as important, but the technique is. So we're going to go through this, and we can affect the turbulence. We can affect it moving back and forth. And you can also use a displacer to do this and create the animation. But how did I get it to loop back and forth into itself? The easiest answer I could show you was using the restriction tag. Instead of doing something crazy like using dynamics and all that jazz, especially when it's an animated loop, I just wanted to get it done the quickest and most painless way and loop back into itself. So I just dropped a keyframe at 0, a keyframe at 24 frames, and went back to the beginning, dropped it out, hit 0, dropped another keyframe, went to the 48-second mark, hit 100, and really simply went back to 0 over here. And now, if you have a lot more frames, it's a little bit more seamless, but you can turn on the dress and turn it back off so it loops back and forth into itself. Okay, so that's the quick and painless way of doing that technique. And then the next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is the grass movement and the grass placement, how you're able to do that and how you're able to create pathways as well. So the way that I use Cinema 4D usually is with Octane. It's my go-to renderer, and it's just because I started with it and I just understand all its kinks and the things that work and the things that don't. But let me pull up one more project over here so we can start from scratch. Hit this guy over here, and what I'm going to do is drop a plane, and on this plane I'm going to move over the width segments and the height segments, and I'm going to hit my display over here and get my shader lines on, and then I'm going to bake this guy, right? And next I'm going to drop another cube. I'm going to make this my blade of grass. You know, usually I use Forester to do this, but I think it's better because I think it's better I show you the technique first, and then I can go through Forester if you want at the end of the presentation, but it's not really the most important thing. The important thing is how you're going to get these things to clone, how you're going to create the pathways, and how you're going to get them to loop and get the movement going. So I grabbed this cube. I want to make it as much like a blade of grass as I can. So really simply, I'm just going to pull this in, pull this guy in, and that's as good as a blade of grass can look. With the time that I got. Let me pull this in a little bit more, and sweet, tight. Okay, wicked. Now I just want to bake this guy. Sweet. And I'm going to go into my axis center, and I want to drop my axis to the bottom of Y. I'm going to hit execute. Sweet. And now I'm going to bring up my Octane scatter, right? And so I've got my grass. I'm going to title it just so I know. My blade of grass. I've got my ground too. And what I'm going to do now is put the blade of grass underneath the Octane scatter. I'm going to tell my Octane scatter that I need a surface. I'm going to grab my ground. I'm going to put it over here. And now, in my Octane scatter, I've got my blades of grass clone basically, right? I'm going to hit T on the thing, T on my keyboard, and now I'm just going to bring them down over here. So, really cool thing about Octane is that you can always push. You can really push the amount of clones that you have on it compared to anything else. So I can get a crazy amount over here. But the important thing really on this is how we're going to use weight maps to manipulate this. And best way I can show you guys is I'm going to grab this this ground plane. Next, I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to hit the selection tag over here. And what I want to do is create a pathway for the grass to move so that there is no grass, basically. And just going to grab the selection tag. I'm going to hit the polygonal selection instead of the object selection. And I'm going to quickly draw a path over here. Now I'm going to go into select. I'm going to do set vertex weight like what we did earlier. And I'm going to move it to 100%. And right now, what I've got is... Right now what I've got is the clones will be cloning on top of this, on where the yellow is, and red is where it isn't going to be cloning, but we don't want that. So I'm going to do Control Z, and what I'm going to do is select, and I want to invert that selection. And with that invert, then I'm going to set the vertex weight. Sweet, cool. All right, so now we know where they're going to clone. And what I need to do is have the octane scatter recognize that weight. So I'm going to take this weight tag we've created, put it in the vertex map, and with the vertex map, it's present within that. I'm going to up my count to something crazy like that, because I think it was at 0 before, and I move my limit to an instance of 1. Okay, sweet. So right now we've got a path, right? And the cool thing about this is that I could select my weight map, and I could start drawing paths and clearing out sections of this thing where I don't want it to clone. And this is kind of the method that I really utilized when I was creating my pathways within my my other piece with the tower. And so I can show you guys over here. It's pretty much, you can decide where you want your clones to go. And a cool thing about this is that you don't even need just Octane to do it. So I'm going to show you a method that you could utilize the cloner within Cinema 4D. So let me turn this guy off over here. Cool. I'm going to grab the blade of grass. I'm going to put it underneath the clone. And it just works a little bit different. So with the Octane scatter, you use the weight map. And with the Octane cloner, you use the store selection tag. So instead of grid, I'm going to hit object because I want my clones to go on top of this ground plane. I'm going to take my ground plane, drag it onto object. And now that it's on the object, notice that it's aligning incorrectly. So I want to do align to clone turned off. And now I've got the stuff aligned onto my plane a lot better than I want. And I'm going to hit T on this guy. T on this guy to basically scale it. And I'm going to hit multi-instance. And within multi-instance, I'm going to move it to something crazy like 2000. Okay. Same thing that we had before with the Octane, but the way that we're going to move these guys around is a little bit different. We've got the cloner, and I've got my ground selected, and there's a pathway over here. So instead of using the weight tag, what we're going to do is hit the store selection tag. And with that being done, I'm going to grab my, and it's created this triangle beside the ground. I'm going to grab the cloner, grab the triangle, move it to selection, and boom, we've eliminated the ground over here as well. Now, I can do the same thing that I was doing prior. Over here, I'm going to grab this guy over here. And I want to eliminate these guys over here and eliminate these guys over here. And then I'm going to hit update. 1 second, guys. Let me grab this, and eliminate this, eliminate that. I want it to update. Boom. And now we've eliminated the grass over here. So now we can create pathways. Now we can create the grass cloning where it needs to go. So how do we get the animated grass going the way that it was within the original clip over here so that it loops into itself? And the way to do that is really simple. I'm not using wind dynamics. I'm not using anything other than a shader effector. So if you're noticing, this stuff is all looping into itself. The trees are with the same exact system, really subtly moving. And I'm doing it with a shader effector attached. So I'm going to grab this cloner. I'm going to go into the effectors over here. I'm going to hit shader effector. And within shader effector, I'm going to go into shading. I want a noise to affect it. So I'm going to hit noise over here. And I'm going to double click in here. And within the shader effector too, what I want it to do is tell the parameter that I want it to animate. So I don't want it to animate the scale. I don't want it to animate the position. I want it to animate the rotation. So I'm going to create some subtle movement over here. I'm going to pause my Octane render for now. And create some subtle movement over here, about 12 degrees. Some subtle movement over here, about 10 degrees. I'm going to go into my shader effector. I'm going to double click on my noise. And the way that the loop period works is based on frames per second. So I've got 72 frames right now, which means 24 frames goes into it 3 times. So I'm going to hit my loop period for 3. Then I'm going to hit my animation speed for 2. And really quickly, I'm going to hit the play button. And these guys begin looping. And they loop into himself, and now you've got moving blades of grass going. Okay, so I'm doing pretty good for time right now. And let's bring up one more sweet little lesson. So one issue I was having with this project, and I'll bring it down over here. If you'll look at it, the texture for the right arm of the child over here was a lot darker than the texture for the top of her arm. And that's because the texturing was baked into it in the 3D scan that way. So what I wanted to do was find a way within Octane Render to basically affect a specific part. So I'm going to do one more lesson for you guys and showcase that. I'm going to start up my Octane as well. I'm going to drop a cube over here. I'm going to showcase you the basics of the technique so you can utilize it in whichever way you want, because we don't need to do it end to end basically. So I've created some segments on this. I'll hit Giro shading over here. I'll grab the cube, and then I'm going to bake those lines into it. Sweet. I'm going to grab the selection tool over here and grab the polygonal selection. I'm going to select this part over here. I'm going to go into select and create a vertex weight map. Hit 100. So now we know that everything that's going to happen, my painting is going to happen onto the yellow. And now I want to create a texture. And once again, this is the basis form of like the technique, but you can utilize it in so many different ways. I'm going to hit this guy over here so I could see the textures that I'm creating. I'll create a glossy texture. I'll drag it onto the cube. And now that it's onto the cube, I'm going to double click it, go into basics, and pull up my node editor. So within my node editor, what I want to do really quickly is I want to pull up a vertex map. Right on. And RGB. An RGB node. I'm going to double it up. And what I'm going to do next with this vertex map, I'm going to grab the weight that I created, or the vertex weight map, and I'm going to put that into the diffuse. And if you notice, we've got some colors going. Now, what node am I missing to connect these two is the mix. And so, oops. We don't want this guy. We want the mix node. Sweet. Okay, so I'm going to use my vertex weight map to create the amount. I'm going to plug in my RGB spectrum, and I'm going to turn this color to red. I'm going to turn this color to blue. Sweet. Oops, I'm using the wrong one. I'm going to turn this guy to red. Right on. And I'm going to plug this in, and with the mix texture, I'm going to plug this into the diffuse. And right away, we're able to basically paint onto our image. And so with Shift, I can smooth out the lines. And with Control, I can start drawing onto it. And I can basically paint on my image. And so this is really helpful in either, this is really helpful for one, putting in some graffiti onto your work. But number two, if I pull up the image that I was talking about, what I was able to do was select just the arm of the character using the polygonal selection tool. I was able to select just the arm, and that's all I wanted to color correct within the piece. And pulling up the node editor, what I could do from then on is basically go, okay, I want to color correct just the red channel. Color correct, and color correct. Grab this guy, put it in between the red. And then what I was messing with the skin tone of the image was basically the brightness, how bright it was going to get. And I can change the color to the hue and change the saturation of the piece as well. Okay, sweet. So that's how I was using weight maps to create this image. And moving forward, these little projects were able to kind of push a few more design aesthetics, and I was able to create more and more interesting concept art with my images. But that's for a lesson for a different time. So I am your instructor, Victor Dimitrov, and when I do work, it's under weight of thought. And what I've learned over this process is that if you really want to grow as an artist, it's really important that you take ownership of your career and start doing more and more personal projects, because those are the projects that are going to enhance your aesthetic and get you to play around and create the work that you want to work on, because it oftentimes attracts it right back to you. So, without further ado, thank you, Maxon and the crew for everything, and thank you for allowing me back onto your stage.
Great stuff, Victor. We've had a number of comments about, was that a 66 Mustang earlier on?
Oh my God. Okay, cool thing about that was that it's actually a Tesla, because our company's really connected to, they're good friends with Elon Musk company, so it was important that it was kind of like a reference to a Tesla, basically. Yeah.
Nice. I've noticed also there is a theme, or an anime-inspired theme that runs through a lot of your work.
Oh my God. Okay, there's so much anime. So I just want to bring up even the demo reel. If you look at it really quickly, you can notice that it's just like Akira like Akira anime from the beginning to the end, basically. So as long as everything has kind of like a painterly style to it, and that it has a lot of just detail, you know, that's the stuff that attracts me towards this art form more than anything. And growing up with Akira, you know, we talked earlier about Attack on Titan, just so much Studio Ghibli anime. Like, I love that stuff. And when I can make 3D look not like 3D, where you question, is it a painting, is it this, is it that, like, that's my favorite aspect of it.
And you mentioned the inspiration about making you a better artist by doing your own individual artwork. How much does that and then influence your professional work?
So I actually, it seems like all the personal work that I do is the stuff that basically attracts all that work that I actually like doing towards me. So a lot of the time they'll come at me and go, "How? Like, I want a piece like this," and it's always mine, because when it comes to like my demo reels, I try not to put client work. I try to put my own pieces in there because I find that attracts more of the actual work that I want to do.
Interesting. That's a nice compliment. Hey, can you make it look like this artist?
It's like, I am this artist.
That's me. Yeah. Excellent. But there's also a wider conversation about styles and being known for a style, which is excellent, but then breaking out from being known for a style. Mm-hmm. And do you like hop over to either side of that, or do you like embrace both?
I like both. You know, when I'm working on my own stuff, of course I have my own preferences. But when I'm working with anybody, for say my good buddy Harrison, he goes under H Tapes. When we work together, what I really like is it's a blending of styles, and I feel I learn a lot from that, because he's got different techniques that I could learn from, and I've got different techniques that he could also learn from.
And I know that also in your past you have been a musician. You probably still are a musician and so on. But how does the music aspect or the audio aspect affect how you approach a job?
So when I was younger, I used to make rap music, and that's where the name Weight of Thought even came from. But basically, what I learned from the craft of music was that everything is technical. Whether you're rhyming, whether you're creating music, whether you're doing CGI, it's a technical craft. And the important thing about a technical craft is to infuse it with some sort of creativity so that you stand out, because anyone could hit the buttons and be a technician, but very few people can be artists within the field.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the art that separates you as well, which is why it's so important. That's why it's so important to be doing these personal projects as well.
Yeah, you just want to push yourself to the point where, like, you see what the furthest end of what your style looks like, you know? Yeah. Because if you look back to my previous presentation a couple of years ago, I was still finding it, you know? And I feel like at this point now, especially with that robot project, which is why I talked about it and why it's special to me, was basically because it was so intuitive, you know? For the first time, it felt like the tools aren't hampering me. I don't have to learn anything new. I'm just creating from scratch and doing it really quickly.
Yeah, and that's the advantage. It's a bit like a musician really knowing the instrument. You're able to think the design, think the creation that you want to see, and then you're able to execute it.
Oh, and just to be clear too, it's research, you know? Like, I think that, like, everyone thinks that you create stuff out of a vacuum. It's totally incorrect, you know? Like, a lot of it's just research. So I'll pull up my PureRef, and then from then on, I'm just going on the internet, and for the full day, I'm searching images that coalesce to the vision that I want to create. Yeah. And then I pick out 2 or 3 from those, but from there, I always have that open in my second monitor. I'm looking at both to basically see, oh, this artist pulled from this artist pulled from that. How do I create something like that? And how do I make it my own? Because I think you have to find that barrier of imitation. And then when you see that, like, that moment where you're becoming an imitator, then you have to go off the beaten path and start doing it your way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, making it your own. Be inspired by, yeah, that's right. It's not stealing anymore. It's inspired.
Yeah.
This is fantastic stuff. Can you bring up your thumbnails, please, with you? Oh, you got Weight of Thought on there already.
Yeah.
So that's where people can get hold of you, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, and I've just been putting up more and more of my work and concept art and all that jazz. And, you know, also just like to anyone looking at this stuff, like, this isn't paint over, you know? Like, this is all just Cinema 4D and Octane and tips and tricks on how to make it look the way that you want it to look. I'll export it. I'll put a color correct within Photoshop or After Effects, whichever one I feel like using, and then it's done. And
Excellent.
So utilize the tools that you've got, and you don't have to use Redshift. You don't have to use these things, but do if you can. I think for me, I just started with Octane. It's so intuitive, but now that Redshift is a CPU function too, and I can have both, I think I will play around with it a little bit.
I'm glad we could help you with that. Thanks again,
Gotta do the
Victor,
plug,
for sharing
yeah.
all this amazing stuff. So once again, let's say thank you, and we'll hope to see you again.
Right on. Cheers.